All right, y'all, what's going on? It's Combo Breaker 99. I am back with another video. All right, y'all, I'm back with another video here. And I know this is kind of like a continuation. We can call it like a continuation of the discussion about not just Lauren Murphy, but, you know, the well-being of a fighter. OK, because I know I got some different responses to what I said and, you know, how I feel, in my opinion, and basically my whole take on when a fight should be stopped and how a trainer should step in to save their fighter's life, right? And, you know, I know some people feel that they feel that, yeah, Lauren Murphy, and let's just keep using her as an example, but a fighter like Lauren Murphy, who's getting dominated for 3 rounds and doesn't really have anything to offer and just continues to take punishment. A lot of y'all feel like, yeah, the fight should have been stopped, right? Even a lot of fighters felt that way. You know, fighters like DC said, hey, the referee should step in and stop it. Fans, you know, they felt like it was time to stop the fight, and that just be it, right? Live the fight another day. But there's some of you fans that still believe that a fight like this, even on this level, when a fighter is, you know, taking this type of punishment, that they should be able to go out on their shield. Lauren Murphy's making that argument. She continues to go on and on with people on Twitter that, even, you know, some people I've seen just saying that, hey, we felt sorry for you, you know, and she got mad at that. You know, I don't even think that the person I saw tweet that was trying to make fun of her, he was just saying that he felt sorry for her because, you know, she was taking a beating, right? She's a fighter, but in that particular moment, she had nothing to offer, right? So even if you are a fighter, we can feel sorry for you because you're a human, right? You had nothing to offer and you had nothing to put Jessica Andrade in trouble. So, yeah, you were getting beaten up and dominated to the point you look pitiful, right? So when a person says that, they're not trying to make fun or crack jokes. They're just saying that that's what they seen. And that's what I seen. That's why I'm just saying, like, I understand why a lot of people say it's time to stop the fight, because I feel strongly on that. And this isn't the first time we've seen beatings like this. I know she wanted to make the argument that Glover Teixeira, you know, he was gashed up, bloodied up, and just getting beaten up by Jamal Hill, which he was. And same with that, if the ref felt the need to stop it, or the doctor stepped in and say it's time to stop the fight, or the trainer, I'm good with that. You know, I would have been good with that too. But the reason why he had a strong case to continue to going on, because he was still always in the fight, right? He still had a few takedown moments and still had some good moments where he was landing back on Jamal Hill. So if you look at his fight, he was still game, right? Whereas Murphy, she was not offering anything. You know, she was completely in survival mode and just taking a beating. You know what I mean? Like, her heart was in it, but her body was totally dominated and mauled and destroyed to that point, right? And that's why I just wanted to talk about in this video is, like, there's a difference between wars and just straight up muggings. All right, so a war versus a mugging. I think most of y'all know what that is, right? Y'all pretty much know what that is. But before we really get into the video, this is my definitions of it. All right, these are my definitions. Okay, so a war, as y'all know, that's 2 fighters that are going back and forth. It is a war. Self-explanatory, right? 2 fighters that are dishing out punishment, but also receiving a lot of punishment. Dishing out a lot of punishment, but they're still receiving a lot of punishment. There's toe-to-toe action. They're going back and forth. Every time a fighter, he fires back, the other fighter fires back, and they also land. They also do damage, right? So it's one of those type of fights where you just have so much going on, so much explosiveness. It's very close. It's very competitive. You don't know who's ahead. They're both damaged. They're both wounded, but they're in the moment physically and mentally. They are in there, right? So there's many a time that, you know, trainers, they're probably on the outside, you know, cringing, but at the same time, they're like, maybe my fighter can pull it off. Maybe my fighter can pull it off. He's really damaged, but he's still in it. He's still in it. He's still in it, right? That's usually what the best that's usually what you would consider a war, right? A mugging. We know what that is, right? A mugging is somebody that is just getting completely dominated by one fighter. I mean, a fighter is just beating them almost from pillar to post. You know, he's beating him from one end of the cage to the other end of the cage. You know, and that fighter really has nothing to offer. Every round is about the same. This fighter's just taking combination after combination, power punch after power punch, and the cornerman, he's watching. At this point, you know, you're probably like maybe 3-4 rounds into the fight. And this is boxing. I mean, kind of using some boxing as an example. 3 or 4 rounds into the fight, or we'll say if it was MMA, 2 or 3 rounds into the championship fight, and he's taking a beating. You try to give him a chance because his heart is still in it. His body's not in it, but his heart is still in it. Every time he sits down, he's speaking to you saying, "Oh, give me one more chance, give me one more chance." But you're like, "Oh man, like, I don't know, man. Look at you. What are you doing right now? You're just taking a beating." And that's to the point, you know, the mugging is that bad where they say, "I'm gonna give you one more round, and that's it." Or the doctor, he steps in. All right, mugging is just complete dominance. You know, when you're just getting completely beaten up, turned into meatloaf, and you have nothing to offer. That's the opposite of what a war is. All right. You know, I've seen this many a time. That's why I can't be one of those ones that say, okay, if I see a fighter just getting beaten up like that, oh, I'll let it go on. No, like, there's a difference. You know, there's a complete difference. Like a war, you'll see 2 fighters battling it out. You know, one fighter might be swollen, one fighter might be busted up, one fighter might lose a tooth or whatever, and he might get knocked down multiple times, but he gets back up and he's right back into the fight, right? So when you see that type of action, you know, the cornerman, he might be looking a little worried for his fighter, but at the same time, he sees that there may be a moment, right? And to me, that's what a fighter signs up for, and that's what the trainer has to back him up on in that particular moment. Like, a fighter signs up for war, not for death, all right? Now, death is, you know, it's a part of the game. It can happen, but when it comes down to it, war is what it's about. Like, if you're putting up a good fight and your opponent's putting up a good fight, we have to let it play out, right? We have to let it play out because that's what they signed up for, a war. They didn't sign up for getting dominated. Like, if their opponent is completely outskilling them and just beating them up to the point that, you know, they have nothing to offer, then you pull your opponent out. Then you pull your fighter out, right? That's why, just responding to my man, 2 Beast, shout out to 2 Beast. And I'm not putting him on blast or anything. It ain't no beef, you know, it's just it's just his opinion versus my opinion. And like I said, if you have an opinion that's different from mine, I respect it. If I disagree, we can talk about it. But I don't waste time, you know, arguing with anybody about anything that's just childish. But, you know, I can definitely see where he's coming from here. You know, this is his opinion. I totally disagree with it. But, you know, I feel like every fan has built their love for MMA in a different way. You know what I mean? From different backgrounds. So 2B said this in the comment section. Like I said, it's public, so I would just go ahead and read it. You know, and it's a long one, so I figured he wanted me to see it. So he said, "I can promise that I never have and never will hope for a fighter to get stopped when they show a clear desire and effort to continue fighting, aside from simply wanting my picking the fight to win. I just simply have to wear that hat of bloodthirsty. The real issue that everyone should be in uproar about when it comes to a fighter's health is weight cuts, in my opinion. MMA is starting to sound like football now. But I get it. Me, I'm just black and white with it. I invested my time into an event to witness an event where lots of violence can and will take place in the story. So when I see a fight like Lauren versus Jessica, I personally can't then say this is outrageous and shouldn't be happening. I, just like the fighters, know what I signed up for. I know my opinion is unpopular, but I simply don't agree with the idea of saving someone from their self when the best thing I could have done to save that fighter was to advise them not to fight to begin with. All right. So, yeah, respect to 2 Beasts for all of that he said, even though I disagree with everything that he said. I just wanted to put that out there that, you know, this is how some fans feel. And in my opinion, I totally think the opposite, as someone that loves the sport and been watching it forever, and not just, and this is where we separate, okay? I'm not a bloodthirsty fan. I don't watch it just as a fan. I watch it as a martial artist, and I watch it as someone who's studied certain combat sports and someone that understands both sides, and somebody that understands that fight game is dangerous and you always have to be 100% in it, and it takes a lot of your life, but this is not this is not your real life. This is not your whole life. Okay. So I always believe that there should be some type of balance here where if a fighter is not committed in a fight and he or she is getting dominated, the fight should be stopped. Okay. Like, I know everybody wants that perfect record, and some fighters don't want to be labeled a quitter, but there comes a point in a fight where you have to just say, that's it for today. I couldn't do it today. I was getting beat up. I was dominated. That's it. Okay. So I don't come from that. I just don't come from that on my channel. Like, if anybody's looking for me with the casual fan videos or the bloodthirsty talk, that's not me. I can watch these type of wars, and that's what I'm saying, wars. That's why we're going to get to wars, right? Muggings, we watch every now and then because that's what we're dealt. But there comes a point when I feel like even a mugging has to be where a mugging has to be stopped, plain and simple, right? When I don't pay to see muggings, I pay to see competition. That's what I pay to see. I pay to see two fighters. That's why we like to see the best fight the best. We don't like to see a fighter that's considered a bum or a tomato can in there with somebody that's on a high level, right? That's why we always want to argue we need to see the best fighting the best, right? Because we want to see a back and forth war or a good chess match, right? I don't pay for just blood. I don't pay for just violence. So like he said, I invested my time into an event to witness where there's lots of violence, where a lot of violence can take place. No, like, not me. I'm there to see, a competitive fight. And if violence is there, so be it, right? I mean, every fight has some level of violence, but I'm not just paying for like one-sided slaughterings, And that's what I want to talk about in this video. I want to talk about the difference between a war and a mugging, right? The fight game is so much more than weight cutting. That's just a part of it. Like, that's just one of the dangerous parts of it. But the fight game, is so much bigger. One of the big things that we have to save fighters from is from themselves, not just in the cage, but from other things, protecting themselves from, doing crazy things, drugs, bullying, making sure that they're staying, just staying in the realm of the fight game, right? But also in the cage as well, you have to save a fighter in the cage as well, right? That's the whole point of having a trainer. The trainer is there. The cornerman and the trainer are there to, give you advice on what you should do in a fight because they see what's going on from the outside, right? So they're not only there to tell you what to do in the fight, but they're also there to tell you when you had enough. Okay, like that's a big part of the fight game. So if you have a promotion, you got to understand that's got to be a big part of it. Making sure fighters don't die because that's going to give you a bad rep too. You got to have referees that's going to be willing to say, hey, I'm taking you out to fight. You can fight another day. All right. But right now you're just getting outgunned. And if they feel bad about it, tough. When the fight high comes down later on, they can watch the fight and say, oh, okay, I can see it now. They can go back and watch the tape and say, okay, I was taking a bad beating. Right. And that's why I'm saying, like, when you look at a fight, again, going back to the example of Lauren Murphy and, bringing up Wmma. Okay. A war is what Wmma was in with Wei, okay? Wei and Wmma, they were going at it. They were going at it blow for blow. There may have been a couple of hits from Wei that started to, start the swelling on Wmma's head, right? But she was still in the fight, right? That's just one of those things that she had to fight through in the moment. Now, if they wanted to stop it, I would understand because that was a big hematoma. That's one of the biggest we've seen in the sport of MMA, I think, right? So if they would have felt the need to stop it, yeah, but the referee kept looking and saying, okay, this girl's still in it. She's still winning rounds. She's still putting damage on Wei. She still has something to offer, right? Now that's a war. Two fighters going back and forth and, putting everything on the line, and they're giving as well as they're receiving. Both fighters are giving and they're receiving. So you can't step in at that moment because anything could happen. Now, looking at Lauren Murphy versus Jessica Andrade, that fight pretty much had one result, okay? That one had one result. Eventually, at some point, Jessica Andrade was going to put Lauren Murphy out of her misery with that type of beating. Like I said, she kind of took her foot off the gas a little bit with her punches because she was throwing in volume. She was lucky she was throwing in volume in this fight and not committed to them old, hard Hulk swings like she usually does. But still, it was a big accumulation. And when I look at this, I'm not looking at just blood. That's one thing people have to understand too, because they respond back and say, oh, just because you see a lot of blood, oh, the fight, the fight should be over. When you see a lot of blood, the fight should be over. No, like some people just bleed easier. Look at Montana, Miesha Tate. Miesha Tate's had busted up noses, but she can continue to fight on, even against Holly Holm. That's a war. The fighter is still in it. Just because you draw a little blood on a fighter doesn't mean you have to stop it. I'm talking about the internal damage, like the internal damage that you suffer from, these type of fights. When a fighter is just clearly not answering back and they're not offering anything in the cage and they continue to take a beating, I don't have to see blood or swelling. You just know that they're on the verge of being finished or possibly being finished. And Lauren, she was taking that type of beating, in my opinion, like that type of beating where I would have been like, oh, man, one more shot could just do it. Right. We seen it in fights with, like, rest in peace, Levander Johnson, which this happened like almost 17 years ago. He was taking a bad beating in that fight until he was stopped in like the 11th round, I believe. And he was unconscious and they had to take him out of the ring. And yeah, unfortunately, he lost his life. Right. Same with Gerald McClellan. I was like over 20 years ago, that match I seen, where he passed out in the ring after he got stopped. He wasn't necessarily like bleeding everywhere and looked all gory. He was just taking a beating from, his body was really damaged from the inside. So there's a difference between these wars and muggings, and these are some of the ones I just had to mention, post up here. Like, of course, Whaley versus Wmma and WMMA. And another fight that I know some people will disagree on that was kind of a war. It was kind of a war is Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena 2. Well, the thing is, it wasn't really a war. The thing is, Pena never stopped trying, right? I mean, it wasn't like a back and forth fight where it was like Juliana Pena was winning around, Nunes was winning around. It wasn't like that, but Juliana Pena still had the look in her eyes, even through the blood. Like, yeah, her head was split open, but to me, she was still showing a sense of urgency. She just didn't have the IQ to apply it, right? Like, Lauren Murphy could have had the IQ in her fight, but it was just her overall body language. It didn't have any type of urgency as far as reacting to what Jessica Andrade was doing, as far as like getting in a better position, right? I mean, at least Juliana Pena, to me, she was still like getting her licks in. She still left some damage on Amanda Nunes to make us say, okay, we can't stop these here. Even her corner, they probably were like, okay, it's gonna come at some point. You're taking a lot of damage, but you still in it. Let's do something, right? And yeah, I would say that fight, it's not like Whaley versus Wmma at all, but Juliana Pena showed us something that, hey, she's still ready to go. You had Diego Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo. Oh, man, that fight there, the first fight, these two fighters, they were going back and forth. I mean, Diego Corrales getting dropped, Jose Luis Castillo getting beat up, and there could have came a point where the doctor felt the need to stop it, but they have to find that point where somebody's not throwing back. But in these fights, they were really going at it. It was war. So there's really a good argument for these type of fights. Like, we see a lot of damage, but we can't stop it because it's also entertainment. Like, entertainment, is a big part of this too. The crowd, when they see these wars and it's give and take, and also the fighters' hearts are still in it. Both fighters' hearts are still in it, and their bodies are in it. You have to let it continue on, right? That's what makes these wars, right? And that's why there's always an argument why you can't stop these wars. Now, muggings, man, that's a different story. Look at these muggings I had to post here. Like, of course, y'all know is Valentina Shevchenko versus Priscilla Cachoeira. And all I have to say about that one is enough said, right? I mean, we're talking about a fighter that is known as like this big, exciting puncher, but just lacks so much dimension. She just lacks so many dimensions that we knew something like this would happen, right? So these are the type of fights that when they happen the first time, it's like a highlight, right? But nobody really wants to see these type of fights, right? We don't come in with that type of mentality to say, I want to see somebody just go in there and get pummeled, right? No, we want to see the best fighting the best. So when it was first on paper, I think everybody that knows MMA knows what could happen, but they're still thinking, okay, maybe there's a puncher's chance. Maybe the fight just has to happen at the time because this was one of Valentina's first fights. But now that she's showing her level, we don't want to see these type of performance. But yeah, that fight, the Bullet, she just was having her way with Cachoeira. Now that is a mugging. That's when you know that the referee has to step in at some point, or your corner has to say, "Hey, Doc, let's stop this thing. This is it. You know, this is terrible. Like, we got to get her out of here," right? Like I mentioned in my last podcast, James Toney versus Iran Barkley. You know, there came a point after 7-8 rounds, his trainer, I think it's Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, you know, he was like, "Hey, you got to show me something. I'm going to stop this fight." Because, you know, James Toney was just putting the combinations on him. Like, he wasn't near the point of, like, dropping him, because James Toney wasn't, like, dropping him throughout the fight, but he was just beating him. I mean, to the point his eyes were swelling and he was bleeding. And you know that internal damage was taking place because it was like a constant barrage of baseballs just hitting him in the face. You know, he's constantly hitting him with these combinations and he's not offering anything back, right? He's just laying on Toney. Tony's beating him up on the inside. He's beating him up from the outside to the point you're kind of cringing. Like, okay, if you're not offering anything, I got to stop it. And that's what his trainer did. You know, he did the right thing. That's what you're supposed to do. Mayweather Gaddy. I mean, look at this. Floyd Mayweather was making like meatloaf out of this guy. I mean, six unanswered right hands to the body at one point. And then he just go back upstairs and just tee off on this guy. Mayweather was having fun in this fight for like 6 rounds until Buddy McGirt said, "Hey, I'm stopping this fight." And Arturo Gatti, rest in peace, he couldn't argue that, right? Because he had nothing to offer. He was always a few steps behind Floyd. So yeah, you can't blame anybody. You know, you can't blame anybody. You can't blame no cornerman for wanting to, you know, take his fighter out of the game. There's no, you know, there are quitters, but in certain situations there are points where you just have to understand why a fighter has to retire in a particular fight, right? And then this one, Roy Jones versus Richard Hall. I mean, what do I need to say about this fight? Roy was just toying with him for like 10 rounds till he got him out of there. I mean, these vicious uppercuts, knocking him down continuously. I mean, imagine what this guy's brain looked like after this fight. You know what I mean? Like, maybe not even after this fight, but maybe like 10, 15 years later, right? So we're just looking out for these fighters here, man, because these type of muggings that you face, they do a lot of damage. I think they do a lot of damage. Now, wars, they can too, you know, the type of Bo Holyfield wars, they can do damage too, but you still have to look at that entertainment side and that well-being side, you know, because in a war, a fighter is still putting up both fighters are still putting up a good case on why they should continue on, because that is what they signed up for. They signed up for a fight, not to go in there and just get beaten up. And that's what I'm saying. When a fighter is showing up for a fight, okay, they're going to go in there and say they're ready. But again, the trainer's looking from the outside and he knows when his fighter is off, you know, when there might be a little offbeat night or something, you know, where he has to say, okay, he's not all there. His timing is off and he's really getting beaten up to the point that this could really be serious. So, hey, I got to take him out. Because we're all human, man. We're all human. Even fighters are human. They may take a special person to be a fighter, but they're human too. You know what I mean? Like, they have to go to that extent to prepare for a fight, just like any human would, right? It's the mentality that they possess that, you know, wants them to continue to step into the fire. And that's where the trainer steps in to create that balance to say, okay, let us take a step back today, you know. Let's just take a step back today because you want to fight another day. And that's what it all comes down to. Like I said, man, like, I like to see good fights. I like competition, but the number one thing I don't want to see in the fight game is death. I know that sounds kind of crazy, and some people say that's almost hypocritical, but no, not really. I mean, look at Valentina. Valentina, like, I don't think she'll ever get to the point of, you know, taking that much wanting to ever take that much punish, put her life on the line. Or the way she fights is necessarily not in kill mode because she doesn't hit that hard. She's just always like, you know, counter-striking and playing that chess match, you know. Because it's like she said, when she wants to retire, man, like, she still wants her mind, right? That's why she fights the way she fights. You know, she doesn't want brain damage like these other fighters. You know, that's her mentality. You know, so she's one fighter you don't have to worry about saving from that. But these other fighters, you do 100% have to save them from themselves in certain situations. And I believe that. Deontay Wilder, he got mad at Mark Breland, but I would have done the same thing. Because you trying to leave your kids fatherless? For real? You really want to do that? That's what I'm saying. Like, the fight game is fun and all, and it's serious when you get in there, but there's still other things that you have to understand on the outside that are way more important. They're way more important. You know, So yeah, I just wanted to come on and kind of, respond back to, my man 2B. So like I said, it ain't no, I ain't mad or ain't got no beef. That's everybody's opinion. I just wanted to make it clear on why, trainers and fighters have to understand. They have to have that understanding that if it gets too thick in there, I have to pull you out of there. You know what I mean? And, like I said, I think that's something that should be discussed with fighters and their trainers, from the jump, before they have before they, really get into training together and they have that relationship. It should be discussed that, hey man, like, I just want you to know that if it ever comes down to that point, you're in a war and we're not even in a war, but you're in a fight where you're just completely dominated, or I feel like I have to save you from yourself, I will do it. I will do it. It's not just all about, being there when they win, but it's also making the right choices when they're on the verge of losing their life. Okay. So yeah, that's how I feel about it, guys. But yeah, final thoughts. Y'all know the difference between a war and a mugging. I ain't have to really break it down like that, do I? Y'all know what it is. But it's a discussion. If my man 2Beats want to get on for a live stream and kind of, really speak his point on it, hey, it's always open. The floor is open on either Friday or Saturday. We can talk about it. But that's clearly how I feel. So and any of my fighters are getting dominated, I'm stopping it. I don't care what they say. If they fire me, I don't care if a fighter was to fire me. I'm gonna be like, hey, at least you were able to be coherent enough to fire me, and you can fight another day. Hey, because hey, I don't want your death on my hands. That's just how it is. But guys, let me know how y'all feel about it in the comment section. Have y'all ever seen some wars that you would have just jumped in and stopped? Do you ever feel that way about a war as well, like a back and forth war like Whaley and Wmma? Would you ever jumped in the middle of that and said, oh, let me stop it? Wmma's head is too big here. You know what I mean? Would you stop that type of fight? I know how y'all feel about Murphy Andrade. Some of y'all would have stopped that one and just let it play out, right? But that's how I feel, guys. Let me know how y'all feel. Make sure y'all subscribe. Combo Breaker 99.